allowing me to come back here again and preach. Before we actually get into the message, I just want to start off with a warning. There's just going to be a lot of sexual content in my message this morning, and it might sound a bit disgusting at times, might sound a bit nasty at times, but it's something that is necessary that I've found when reading the Word, and something that came up recently. So the way I'll essentially organize my message this morning, or this evening, is give up some examples. So essentially the title of my message will be essentially the sanctity of marriage in Christianity versus the sexual depravity that is very prevalent through every single sort of other faith or any sort of idea in general. And so just going through this research and everything before this helped benefit me knowing and helped assure my faith in knowing that Christianity really is the true faith. And by going through it, the research and everything, it just really cemented. So I kind of split up my message in kind of three different portions. We'll start off by looking at different religions as an example to start off, then going through essentially a history throughout the entire Old Testament of showing where Israel failed and how they ended up going to sexual depravity multiple times, and then finish off in the New Testament where we see the Pharisees essentially doing the same thing. So I have different examples here. So starting off with Islam, one of the things that is promised to a martyr is, if you want to write this down or anything, it's volume 3, book 20, and it's one of the hadiths. So there's the Quran, which is considered in Islam the authorized word of God, and then you have the hadiths, which are extra stuff that they believe in as well. And so to the martyrs, they are promised 72 virgins, and this became very much more understood after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, because one of the things that they were fighting for, right, one of the things that they were doing with these terrorist attacks was that at the end of it all, when they go to heaven, or in Islam it's called Jannah, they will receive 72 virgins that they get to just have their way with, have sex with them as much as possible, right? And so obviously in Islam, polygamy is permitted as well. I think it's 3 wives as a maximum, but obviously people go even above that. 4 wives? Okay, thanks, Dad. And so there's a four wives, but even then they can go have even more than that. And I think it's very funny that in their descriptions in the Quran, they simply just say that they have beautiful eyes. Nothing else, just beautiful eyes. And I think, oh, well, no wonder, because that's all they can see, because everything else is covered up. But like versus Song of Solomon, right? Every single part of the woman is described in a beautiful, poetic fashion. When the Quran is just their eyes, because that's all they can see. And I thought that was really funny when doing the research. So example, Islam, right? 72 virgins. And as we read in like Christianity, right? In 2 Peter, we read that when you look at the future, we look at what is going to happen, it should change how we act today, right? And so when in Islam, that is what's promised to you, that will affect how you act today. And so then they treat women much worse. They treat them like objects. And so they don't give them the due honor that should be given to them. Furthermore, this is something I wasn't even expecting when doing my research, but something that came up on Zoroastrianism, which is essentially a dead religion now, but it has influences on Islam and many other religions. It says here, to the soul of the righteous, a 15-year-old virgin is given to you, and then they both ascend to heaven together, and with the same exact idea. And then here we have in Mormonism, men are given multiple wives in heaven. They believe that God and Jesus both have multiple wives, and that through that they populated the earth through a great deal of polygamy. Women, of course, do not have multiple husbands. Only the men have multiple spouses. Because, of course, everyone in Mormonism that created it were all men. So it's very men-centric. And they just see women, right, as this idea of just, as I said here, women are spirit baby incubators. And furthermore, they do not acknowledge, speak, or honor their husbands. Their sole purpose is sex. And that's all they're viewed as in Mormonism. And then looking at that, I just want to look at modern day hookup culture, right? You go to a bar, you see a girl that you think that's pretty, then you go to her place, have sex with her, then you wake up real early, leave and act like you never even saw her, delete her phone number off your phone, and then next week you do it all over again, right? Treating women as if they are nothing more than sexual devices, and women in themselves are allowing themselves to be treated in such a way. And so I don't think either person in this party is in a favorable light. But once again, it's back to this, essentially, this animal idea of humans, that they are just vessels for pleasure and vessels for producing children and nothing more, right? And so this is what happens when you forsake God and forsake what's written in the Bible and what he commands us to do and what his idea between man and female relations. So if we start off now, going into the history. So Genesis chapter 2, we'll start in verse 23. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 23. And we'll be looking at a lot of passages in the Old Testament before we settle into the New Testament. But I just want to look at essentially just an idea going through the Old Testament. So Genesis chapter 2, starting in verse 23. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and they shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." This is, as most people consider, the institution of marriage, right? Adam and Eve. Eve was created from Adam, and now they become one flesh, right? Taken out of the side of man, created a new creation, and together they live together in harmony. This was before sin ever entered in the world. This was God's perfect idea for man and women to be together. One man, one woman together. And at this point, they were eternal beings, right? Because they could eat out of the tree of life, which gives them eternity. And so at this point, they were meant to be into eternity forever together. Obviously, we all know the story. Eve and Adam both take the fruit. Sin enters the human line. And slowly you see the decline of humanity in Genesis from this point on. And so in one generation, right, Cain and Abel, you have the story where murder takes place after just one generation, right? And then you have more sins that just keep on creeping up and up and up and on them. And so if we go into Genesis chapter 4, verse 23 and 24, you have the story of Lamech. In verse 23, and Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, "Hear my wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. Ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold." This is the first instance of polygamy in the Bible. And I think it's very similar that both the first instance of polygamy and also he becomes a murderer. And this isn't explicitly stated in the text, but something that I inferred is that Lamech here does not value humans as if they were creatures made by God, right? He kills someone immediately because he did him hurt, so that means I must kill him. And then he has multiple wives with this idea that their only purpose is to create children or for my sexual pleasure. And so it's the dehumanizing that starts off with the entering in of sin into the world. I just want to refer quickly to Abraham and how he was promised a nation through him. But when his wife got old, his wife wasn't fully trusting, and they said, "Hey, I have this Egyptian slave here named Hagar. Go in unto her and have a son." And then it's Ishmael, the son of the flesh, a son of bondage, as reading Galatians, versus Isaac, who was then promised as later on the son of promise, the son of freedom, and not the son of bondage. And out of Isaac was the fullness of the blessing given unto him, but not through Ishmael. So Ishmael was kind of a wild man and was then forsaken, really. And he was still given a certain amount of blessings, but of course the real blessings went to Isaac. And so this problem that ended up entering into the family of Abraham was just lack of faith and having these multiple relationships. So now past Abraham, I'd like to go all the way into Deuteronomy 17. I'm skipping to some other examples as well, but for time, I want to look at Deuteronomy 17. So in this passage, Moses, this is right before they enter into the promised land. And so Moses is outlining certain rules and guidelines that a king should have when he rules over Israel. He says it's an imminent process is going to happen, is that you will have a king to rule over you. And so these are the certain guidelines that he gives. And so in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, this is speaking about that king that they will have. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. He shall not multiply wives to himself. What was Abraham's greatest sin? His wanting for another wife. And when Nathan came and rebuked him, right, he said, I have already given you so many, yet you still wanted more. And then this is chiefly seen in Solomon, who had 700 wives and 300 concubines, which is just insane. I can't even imagine just how many people that is that you would say that I love you so much, I want to marry you. Oh, I said that to you last week. Now here's another one, and here's another one, and here's another one. And those wives specifically drew him away from Yahweh, right? This idea that I just need to have as many wives, fulfill my desires and everything, and which was not what God commanded with a king. You should not multiply wives unto yourselves. And so then go to 1 Kings chapter 17. This is really what that warning was in the beginning of what I'll speak about now. But 1 Kings chapter 17 and verse 1. During the, after Israel went into the promised land, obviously Israel themselves were not the most pietous kind of people. They kept on leaving Yahweh. They kept on leaving God, and they kept on worshiping a specific god named Baal. And so here we go in Ezekiel 17, verse 1. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. So the way that Baal worship would work, right, is all the Israelites would go together out in the open. So Baal himself was the god of fertility for agriculture. And so if Baal was happy, then that meant that crops would flourish and that we would get rain and everything like that. So the way that they would worship was that Israelites would have massive orgies in the open in order to arouse Baal in the heavens, so that if he was aroused, he would ejaculate rain from the heavens onto the earth in order to water the crops. It's incredibly disgusting, and it's a vile depiction of what is worship. And no wonder, right, God would get so angry at Israel for constantly doing this and claiming it as worship, right? And then not only doing it there, but doing it specifically in the temple of God, which is where his presence was exactly. So when you read these things of where Israel kept on leaving God and worshiping Baal, you can understand the anger that God was feeling. But another thing I also, this first was explained to me when I was in A&M, and the pastor there was going through Jeremiah and explaining it. And when I first heard it, one of the things I said was, no wonder Israel kept on leaving God. Because in one eyes, you have everyone around you telling you, hey, come over here and fulfill all your sexual desires over here, versus another religion that kept on telling you, the cow that you've raised all these years, okay, go ahead and burn it. And don't eat any of the food from it or anything. Just go ahead and burn it. Versus us, we go and we fulfill our sexual desires. And so, to me, it's one thing you would read of the Pharisees is that they look at what the prophets and how they were the ones who stood up. And they said that if I was there and back in my time, I'd stand up, right? I wouldn't be like the rest of everyone else. I'd stand up against all the hatred against God and Yahweh. But when you read this, how they would worship, you can understand why so many people decided to not worship Yahweh, instead do this form of worship. And something that I've also found interesting, and so that's why, right, in 1 Kings 17:1, when Elijah is pronouncing no more rain, he's specifically attacking the god of Baal here. And he's saying, I don't care, whatever your form of Baal worship is, I'm not going to make it rain. I'm not going to allow you to arouse this god. I'm not going to let any of that happen because he does not have the power here. I am the one in charge because I'm the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And so we see it also in Ephesians, you read of this, be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit, right? One thing you can draw from that, right, is to not be overly drunk constantly. That is one thing to get from it. Another thing is, during the time of the first century church, there was these people known as the cult of Dionysus. Dionysus was the wine god of Greek mythology. And so the same thing here, the way that they would worship is that they would all get drunk with wine and have massive orgies, and they'd claim it as worship to Dionysus. And so as you read in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Satan uses the exact same kind of lies to convince you to leave God that he's using with the Israelites here, even to the Jewish Christians during the time of the first century church. And so, like, you have this idea of being filled with the Spirit and being filled with wine. And there's this idea that being filled with the Spirit is being confused with being filled with wine. And so, once again, our worship, right, when we're filled with the Spirit, should not be like that of the world. It's something different, and it's something holy. And so then the last piece of, that I would like to look at is Judges chapter 19. So go back a little bit. And so this, for those who know, is one of the most gruesome passages in the entire Old Testament. Yet it's in the Word of God for us to read so that we can learn from it. So Judges chapter 19, and starting in verse 22. Now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the man that came into thine house, that we may know him. And the master of the house, went out unto them, and said unto them, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly. Seeing that this man is come into mine house, do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Them I will bring out now, and humble ye them, and do with them what seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do not so a vile thing. But the men would not hearken to him. So the man took his concubine, and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her, and abused her all the night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house where her Lord was, till it was light. And her Lord rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. And he said unto her, Up, and let us be going. But none answered. Then the man took her up upon an ass, and the man rose up and gat him unto his place. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife, and laid hold on the concubine, and divided her together with her bones into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. And it was so, that all that saw it said, There was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider it, take advice, and speak your minds. Consider it, take advice, and speak your minds. This is probably the most disgusting passage in the entire Old Testament. But as you remember in Judges, there was no king at this time. This was a time of anarchy in Israel. No one was following the word of God. No one even knew the law, to be honest. And so it gives you an unadulterated, unfiltered, uncensored view of what happens when man forsakes God. Right? At a certain point, this becomes the norm. And this becomes something that people think is a fine thing to do every day. And even the guy whose concubine it was, he just says, Up and let's go. No. Are you feeling all right? Are you feeling okay? No. It's just up, let's get out of here. And no care for human life. And so all of this is to show that in the end times, right? And this will become something that we'll be seeing more of a norm of. And so we see it here in Judges, and it's not anything that will go away. And so in the last part of verse 30, it says, "Consider of it, take advice, and speak your minds." This is one of the few examples in the Old Testament where it specifically talks to the reader and says, consider this, right? Seeing what happens when you forsake God, when you forsake the orders that have been given to you, this is the natural state that happens when you forsake all of this, that sin abounds. And so now if we look into the New Testament, looking at Matthew chapter 19, we see that the Pharisees, who knew the law more so than anyone, start acting in a way that's very similar to the Old Testament by abusing the law, by abusing it. So starting in Matthew chapter 19, verse 1, "And it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came to the coast of Judea beyond Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?" Or some might say for any cause. Right? Already when you ask that kind of question, the assumption is this idea of like, I can put away my wife for any reason. There shouldn't be a reason why I shouldn't just say, here's a letter of divorcement that Moses would write, and we'll get to that later on. And so it became essentially kind of a norm that a man could just divorce his wife for the smallest of reasons. It says for any cause, right? Any sort of reason at all. So if your wife doesn't make you the nicest food for a certain day, all right, divorced. If your wife gets angry at you for the smallest thing, divorce. And you might even get it to a certain point where a man marries a woman, uses them for the sexual pleasure. I don't feel like using you anymore. Divorce. New woman, married, divorce. And it's the same cycle. And so you're saying, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for any cause? Then in reading in verse 4, "And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." In verse 5, it says the word, "shall leave the father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife." The word here used for cleave is the Greek word meaning kola. You get the word collage from it in English, and it means glue. And it says here that they shall be glued, the man shall be essentially glued to his wife, and they twain shall become one flesh. If I want good glue, I don't want glue that'll tear apart after 10 years and they just no longer like each other, and then you just don't use it anymore. I don't like glue that the second that a single little problem emits, the whole thing is broken. Small little bit of water, boom, it's destroyed. The glue that I want is something that is glued together. And that is how it says a man shall cleave to his wife. Be grabbed on so much, it's essentially like glue, and it's inseparable. Then in verse 6, "Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh." Right? One flesh. You don't see two separate entities. "What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder." That word joined together, some translations say yoked together, which is a more accurate translation. You get the word there, joined together, is one singular Greek word, and it comes from two separate Greek parts, which is soon, which means with or along, and zugos, which means yoke. So it's a yoked together combination. So when you have these, if you go to any third world country, they still have them. Or if you go to a really poor farm, you'll probably see this too. But you would have these two oxen, right? And they'd have a bar going over their shoulders. And then underneath each of them, they had this necklace, essentially, right? And so these two oxen will be moving together and carrying whatever was behind them. And you wouldn't want to pay for a really cheaply made yoke, because if they got real mad and just started really pulling that thing, it could just break off, right? And you don't want something like that. You want something that no man can tear asunder. That's how strong this yoke should be, that no man can tear it asunder. And so when you have this marriage pact between man and woman, nothing should be able to separate it. No man, no creation, nothing. This got to be the strongest titanium-made yoke you've ever seen, so that whenever they're going through life together. So mainly, right, you should see this for an oxen-drawn buggy or a cart, right? Or even for agriculture, where they use it to fallow the soil. The whole purpose is moving forward together. And you want to ensure that that yoke is as strong as can be, so they can carry that load together through marriage. And so it's a great example of where God uses agricultural and oxen to describe marriage. And then in verse 7, they say unto him, why did Moses then command to give her writing of divorcement and to put her away? If I was a Pharisee, I'd probably ask the same question. That's a good question to ask, given that Moses gave a specific order to do it. Then Jesus replies in verse 8, he saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her, which is put away, doth commit adultery. As I was saying earlier, no man can tear asunder this yoke that is on these man and woman. It is something that is said that it is for until they die, or the one exception that is given is fornication. And even then, it's like an extreme. Divorce should be something in the last of your minds when you're doing marriage. That shouldn't be something that you're thinking of while you're marrying someone. It should be a lifelong commitment, which is very against everything that I said earlier in this message, right? When you look at Islam, when you look at Mormonism, when you look at hookup culture, when you look at what the Jews were doing when they worship with Baal, right? Very contrary to everything else is one man, one woman together. And so then this isn't even the Pharisees talking in verse 10. His own disciples in verse 10, his disciples say unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. And then verse 11, but he said unto them, all men cannot receive the saying, save they to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb. There are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have been made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sakes. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Given the great weight of marriage, it's not for everyone. If you cannot physically support, if you cannot financially support a wife, and you might see that divorce might be in the future, then for them it's not. You shouldn't be out of good conscience. But that's why Jesus says, not for all men. All men cannot receive this. But for those who can, it is a great blessing. And with all this in view, with all this that we see here with marriage, what is one of the beautiful pictures of marriage that we get from Genesis even all the way into Revelation? We have this future great joining together that will happen in heaven between Christ and his church. Can we finish off in Revelation chapter 17? One of the greatest pictures of the gospel and bringing us back together with Jesus is marriage. And we see that perfectly in Revelation chapter 19 and verse 7. Starting in verse 7. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him. For the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. For the fine linen is the righteousnesses of saints. And he saith unto me, right, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, these are the true sayings of God. And this marriage that we have with our Lord Jesus Christ, which we shall enter in very soon, that marriage that we shall enter in, no man can tear asunder. Thank you.